Hey everyone, welcome to the 90th edition of DF Direct Weekly, the week of the Geoffs. The Games Award has happened, and joining me to discuss this and various other topics, first of all, Alex Battaglia, looking a bit more refreshed versus your showing last week.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of speculation. Was I going through a breakup? Was I hungover? Was I literally on the verge of tears? Well, let me just say, I was actually just tired.
Okay.
So I was not actually going to cry, as much as it might have sounded like it, I swear. But I'm actually much refreshed this week, ready to talk about the Geoffs.
Okay, and of course, John Linneman.
I'm also tired of stutter struggle. I understand, Alex. We've had enough, and it keeps happening. I was playing more games this week, just testing Unreal Engine games, and yeah, it's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
Non-stop.
Okay, so I was going to talk about the Geoffs, but I think we should probably try to put to bed the whole stutter struggle thing with Callisto Protocol PC, because there have been patches. More patches are coming. Alex, you prepared this video showing kind of like the day one performance versus where it is now, and I think it's fair to say that there have been profound improvements, but it's still some way off the finished article, right?
For sure. So right now, when you get in the menu as of the latest patch that I'm talking when you see this video, that it essentially starts pre-compiling shaders in the background and the menu becomes really unresponsive. I don't know if that's good, user experience, but that's the way it is. So then it finishes, and then you get in game, and the immediate feeling is that mostly all of the stutters that I showed off in my original video are not there now. And I didn't show off all of them for the purpose of not wanting to spoil the video, but going through the first 35 minutes of the game almost, essentially all of them that I originally thought were so intrusive that this is a product you should not play, they were not there anymore, which is great to see. The issues that still exist, though, are the fact that it is really weirdly CPU heavy, and it doesn't use all of your CPU. It just uses like 2 threads at most, it feels like at times. Then also the fact that there's other stutters that pop up that seem to be related to loading and or like CPU stuff that is happening in the background, but didn't seem to be shader compilation, because it wasn't about seeing new things. It just was like, it happened. Or like you opened a door and it happened. So you turn around to a new area and it kind of happened. So it still has some of that, and that may require more polishing. And especially with regards to CPU performance, that's something I don't think they'll polish necessarily, because it's maybe just baked in at this point. So that's something to expect if you want to play the title now, for sure.
Is the ray tracing still very heavy as a result of the CPU stuff?
Yeah, it's still incredibly heavy. So like Core i9 1200K, normal stock settings there, but with 6400 megahertz RAM setup, I was still seeing in like that initial prison area, it could drop down to like 55 FPS when you just like span the view a little bit. CPU limited on a PC like that is pretty intense for a game that targeted last gen. Originally.
It seems like other people are having similar issues, specifically when enabling ray tracing. And that also explains why I've seen a lot of comments that, FSR2 doesn't do anything. It's no faster. Yeah. And I think, again, they're just bumping up completely against the CPU limitations.
Yes. So the game is in a much better spot. I would definitely say it is now playable, it is now purchasable, but you have to go in with the mindset that ray tracing requires a stupidly heavy CPU, and I think the GPU requirements are also pretty intense there, because I was like playing with FSR2 balance mode, and it was almost like sometimes with a 4090 and FSR2 balance mode, like almost getting up to like 85% GPU utilization on a 4090. At balance mode.
That's nuts.
That's technically worse performance than like maxed out. That's actually quite a bit worse performance than maxed out CP2077 with ray tracing as of right now without overdrive.
Which doesn't make sense.
Which doesn't make sense. So it is really, really heavy still. But
I wonder, Alex, if there's... So they actually also addressed the lack of ray traced reflections on Xbox.
Oh, good.
And I don't think it's been patched in yet, but they are working on it. But I do have to wonder if there was something with like the DX12 build of this game, and also in turn the Xbox version, that was causing ray tracing to be heavier than it should be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's like, it's running pretty well on PS5 with ray tracing. And so in my head, I'm thinking like maybe there's some sort of API issues here that cropped up, and they had to disable it for launch, and maybe whatever they're doing to bring it back to Xbox could potentially also apply to PC, maybe?
Let's hope, because as of right now, it's like pretty hard to recommend to play it with RT for most people, because I think you'll end up being CPU bound for a lot of people. So yeah.
That's quite remarkable. Are there any actual improvements over consoles in terms of the RT feature set or anything like that?
Well, no, the thing is I have yet to go in and actually do any comparisons, but there are 2 settings for ray trace reflections. The other settings just for shadows and for translucency are on and off toggles. So those are probably the exact same as console, I'd imagine. But the ray trace reflections has a medium and a high setting. I don't know what they do off the top of my head, but I imagine it wouldn't be so surprising if consoles were medium, to say the least.
It is interesting that this ended up being an AMD-sponsored game with some of the heaviest ray tracing we've seen.
Yeah, what's that about?
But it's not necessarily because of the graphics card, though. It's, no. That's the whole,
So it is.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I think we'll leave it there for now. Would you ever review this game, Alex? I mean, I think the thing is that, we didn't really have the time bandwidth to do it when it launched, and it was actually impossible to do because it was impossible to play when we actually had it in the review period. But I am curious. I mean, I do think that we're still looking at a work in progress project here. I'm kind of staggered that it released in that state. There's talk that there was some sort of file error that ensured that it went out with shader compilation issues, which should have been fixed. I mean, they did say it would be fixed pre-launch, but it wasn't. So it's just tricky, isn't it? Because, it is a big high-profile title. There is the scope that PC could move beyond the consoles. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I mean, it's just left us a bit cold, really. It's just left us unmotivated to look at it based on their approach to PC in the first place.
Yeah, I think releasing in that state and then giving it to reviewers in that state is also another thing, because Rock, Paper, Shotgun, Alice, I think it was, right, who did that review there, also had just as much trouble as I did on a lower spec machine, probably a lot worse than what I saw. So sending that to reviewers on PC was also very risky and definitely soured people, for sure.
To be fair, Striking Distance, Glenn Schofield, has been quite open about updates on what's going to be happening to the game and when. But what did annoy me, and it really did annoy me, was there was this message that went out saying some people will have stuttering issues. Some people. Everyone will have stuttering issues. The PC has not been invented yet that could run that day one code without stutters. So the concept that it's some people is kind of borderline gaslighting.
It is a bit. Whether I want to review this in the end, we'll see what happens in the new year. Maybe I will want to go back and just try and get a sense of what the graphics are on console at some point. But as I say that, the ability to change graphical settings, you can't change them in-game, almost makes a review impossible from my perspective. Because I have to constantly go back to a new checkpoint, line up the camera perfectly. It's almost impossible to do a really good review there.
I think, Alex, in that case, it probably shouldn't get the review unless that's changed, because you're right. That's a nightmare.
Yeah, it is super
Covering
nightmare.
Fortnite this week, which a video should be up now, like, that is how you do it. Fortnite, for everything we've said about it in the past, it has the best settings adjustment options.
It's
even
very
on
good.
console. You're just in the game, you can do anything. You get a full free cam if you want in the replay mode. You can change all your settings. It's amazing.
Only if more games had that.
I know, right?
Yeah.
So come on, guys. We need to see this going forward, I hope.
Okay, so some good news with the Callisto Protocol. Still not where it needs to be, though, and that CPU requirement is just kind of staggering.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to the next news topic. As we filmed this, it's the morning after the night before, where Geoff Keighley hosted the Game Awards 2022. We've always been sort of kind of ambivalent to this. There's this kind of, it's almost 2 shows in one, isn't it? There's basically recognition of the talent in the games industry. There were some, some great acceptance speeches, some good awards. But then, it's basically geoffkeighley.com with his game reveals. Can you imagine, the Oscars having trailers for upcoming movies in it? That's kind of like the disconnect that I always see with this. But with that said, there was quite a lot of content in there that is worthy of discussion, and I'm not quite sure where we want to start with this. I guess, Alex, good news in that we had debut trailers for Returnal and The Last of Us Part 1 on PC, even if those trailers were kind of like totally nondescript about what we're actually going to be getting in the product.
Yeah, they didn't say anything other than coming. Da, 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 da. To PC. Da, 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 da. The Returnal trailer was interesting because the first half of the trailer, before a camera cut happened, that was like dramatic. It was all 1080p footage. And then after that, it went to 4K. So it seems like, I don't know who did the editing there, but I could see that there was quite a difference in visual quality between the footage. I'm excited about that. I presume that was PC footage based upon...
Well, it said captured on PC.
Yeah.
But so hopefully...
That sounds like it. So that sounds like the real deal. No evidence of any of the things that have leaked out. I didn't see any evidence of ray traced reflections.
Did you notice though, Alex? Maybe it's YouTube, but the actual fluidity of this trailer was pretty bad.
Yes,
like the frame rate doesn't seem stable at all.
Yeah,
which is weird for this game because so I'm not sure what's going on with the trailer. I assume it's just an editing thing, early build, blah blah blah, whatever. But
who knows?
It's still not the best to see that.
Who knows how it was captured and what was captured in terms of settings and performance.
I actually wonder sometimes, like, if you use like NVIDIA Share, for instance, to capture and you're running at a frame rate above 60, it produces footage kind of like that. So maybe the guy doing the trailer was running at like 120 and, you know.
Who knows? But that's the way it looked. The Last of Us was also another... I think you described it, Rich, just now. Like, they didn't actually show what you're getting on the PC here, other than a reveal date, like the date when it's going to come out. In fact, at the very bottom, it says it was all captured on PS5, and the footage looked like PS5 footage in terms of resolution and stuff anyway. So not much to say there, other than I think this is not done by Iron Galaxy. I think this is actually internal at Naughty Dog, if I recall. And I hope they take some cues from Iron Galaxy in terms of shader pre-compilation being done in the menu. I thought that was very nice. I also liked the additions of FSR 2.0 and DLSS. I hope they have those as well too. Otherwise, it's like, if you're releasing a game on PC these days and you don't have one of those two or both of them, hopefully, well then I kind of ask what you're doing. I just want to put in a word for XESS as well. Oh yeah, please, XESS. Put that in there for all those nice Intel users so they have something that works better on their card. Well, what I'm finding now is that there may not be a huge amount of ARC Intel users out there, but what it basically means is that, and this is actually a disadvantage that FSR2 has at the moment, because it's like years after DLSS 2 came out. So we've got this vast library of titles, big titles that have DLSS 2 support, but no FSR2 support. So, I'm reviewing the Radeon cards at the moment, and, I'd love to go back to play Control, Metro Exodus, at with image reconstruction technology and the full RT feature set. Right. But I can't really, because those are older titles that only support DLSS 2. So I think this is going to require a lot of evangelization from Intel and AMD, and maybe even money has to change hands, because to get or for engineers from those companies to go in and help to integrate the support. But fundamentally, if a game has DLSS 2 support, it's just a matter of engineering effort to get FSR2 and XESS in there, right? Truly is, yeah. So, and I actually think this is, part of the reason why it's harder to recommend AMD, because even when they do catch up, and they will catch up, right, there's going to be those legacy titles that won't support their technologies as well as NVIDIA. So it's got to be done. Real PC gamers play at low settings. So. Yeah, that's the way it's done. In fact, so it doesn't matter. All of these trailers too were also at low settings today, and that explains it. So I'm excited about those two titles. Another thing that I saw on the list here, John thankfully wrote down a very wonderful list of great titles that we all liked here. That I just want to talk about really quickly is Space Marine 2. Space Marine 2. John also wants to talk about this. We had to read up after the fact what the engine was here, and it's called Saber Swarm.
Saber Swarm.
Saber Swarm, and I think you can see the swarm aspect of it just in any of the background shots of this trailer. Like Space Marine, there's a lot of heavy action in the foreground, but just look at the background to see how many, presumably, AI stuff going on there. Maybe it's like collective animation stuff, but it's just like filled to the brim with detail in the background. All these shots here, it reminds me a lot of like going back in time to like a lot of concept art from like 3rd edition Warhammer. There's just like stuff in the foreground, and then there's just massive swarms of enemies in the background. Love it. John, what did you think?
Yeah, that was the thing that caught my attention, was just the sense of scale and scope in the environments. That stuff's just beautiful. And it's actually something I've been thinking a lot about lately with games and the way they present their environments. I find that open world games tend to really struggle to present these dramatic sort of viewpoints, with a few exceptions. But when you have games with this linear level design, or presumably, they're able to do these huge vistas and like really intricate designs that wouldn't necessarily connect that well if you were trying to build an open world. But within these maps, they're able to create something that looks truly just very impressive. Like you step into this map and you're like, whoa, that is cool. And that's kind of a strength of this. And I'm very curious to see how this ends up playing and running, because the trailer was unfortunately, it's pre-release, of course, but wasn't very smooth. I would say it's very up and down. Yeah. Which is also perhaps, good to see, because it suggests that what we're seeing was actually legit gameplay footage as well. Yeah. Right?
That's encouraging at this point in time, given the release date. That's usually fine. Another thing that I noticed just really quickly, this is its own tech, and it's definitely going to be targeting next gen, or the current gen, at this point, as well as PC. There was, in the initial shot, when they're looking at like the chest plate of the main character Titus there's actually like a reflection of like the golden wingspan eagle thing on his like collar that kind of looks a little bit off screen from the angle we're looking at it. I'm curious to see what ray tracing tech maybe they bring into this at all. That was just a little hint. Could also mean nothing, so don't take my word for it there. But I mean, it's targeting current gen and PC. It would be cool to see some RT in here.
Thinking of ray tracing, Alex, that is something that's kind of keeps coming up a little bit. And there's been a lot of talk about, okay, is there a point where current gen console games start targeting 30 FPS again? And I'm beginning to see this trend where it seems like you have 30 FPS modes with ray tracing, or 60 frames per second modes without.
Right.
And I feel like that's a pretty good trade-off. Like, it would be nice to see 60 with RT, and we have seen it occasionally, but if it's 30 versus 60, that kind of thing, with or without ray tracing, I feel like that's a fair compromise. Right? Totally. It doesn't see us dropping all the way down to 30 across the board. So
I would actually probably prefer that setup for a lot of games that can afford it. And as long as, obviously they're not designing their entire game around some sort of ray tracing, then that sounds reasonable. I'd like that too.
Yeah.
Is this the same technology as Darktide, Alex?
No,
this is completely different.
This is completely different studio as well. This is Saber versus Fat Shark. Different sides of a border there, but like the fact that they can't, like, they're here. One thing that I did actually like a lot about this, I like the original Space Marine game, but the color tones here, where like the original Space Marine game looks like an Xbox 360 title where they like really ramped up the colors, like everything's like red or blue, or it's like super. This was a lot more desaturated in a way that I thought was nice. It was palatable.
It's interesting you say that, because that generation was known for desaturated colors.
Yeah.
Lots of browns, and Space Marine looked a bit different than your usual.
It was very colorful in comparison,
which was cool.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Another game, though, on the list that we should mention quickly that was also a little unstable frame rate wise, but good, was Star Wars Jedi Survivor, which is the sequel to Fallen Order. Which, man, what a good game that was. I really like what they made with that, and I'm happy that it was a huge success for them, because it is basically, it's a type of game we don't see that often. Yes, it definitely borrows Souls-like elements, but it's basically a third-person action platforming game with lots of exploration, right? And I'm thrilled to see more of it. And this time, it seems they're building it in Unreal Engine 5. It is not cross-gen, thankfully. It looks very nice, I'd say. Although, coming straight from Space Marine, I'd say it doesn't quite look as good. interestingly, but it's still nice looking game. It's just the frame rate was pretty unstable, but again, pre-release, and that at least suggests that what we're seeing is quite legitimate. So I don't know, what did you guys make of this one?
Unreal Engine 5, it's it's difficult to say what kind of Unreal Engine 5 you're going to be getting, because I still think we're some way away from Lumen and Nanite.
Yeah.
But it still looked really detail rich and impressive, right?
It's hard to tell. They could be using nanite in this potentially.
Yeah.
But I need to look closer to see if there's like visible LOD transitions or not, because the world geo seemed pretty high, like in a way that's. I mean, you could still do it with traditional static meshes as well, I'm sure, but I don't know.
Yeah, it was hard to get an appreciation of what was going on technically. Other than the one scene I noticed, that it was a polished, like Imperial style floor. And there was reflections there that when the enemies were moving around in the foreground, it wasn't obscuring the background reflection. So that could hint towards UE5, at least lumen reflections in play, is the only thing I noticed.
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't think we can pass too much judgment yet as to what features they're using here, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Okay. Another one on the list, Death Stranding 2 got announced.
Yes.
Which I'm happy about. That looks really good. The thing about that really stood out to me, or like kind of surprised me, is the fact that at the end, it specifically mentions that it was created using MetaHuman, which is Epic's technology.
Yeah.
And I was not aware that you were able to use this.
Well, there's a history behind this.
Okay, please explain.
MetaHuman was tech actually developed by 3Lateral. And they developed it around the time with like Star Citizen and like
right.
And they originally did like prototyping for it in UE4, and then they brought it over to Star Citizen, and then 3Lateral's bought by Epic at one point.
That's what it was.
And MetaHuman is now a part of UE5. So it's a really weird naming scheme though, because it seems like they're using UE5 tech for this, but it's separate technically. But yeah.
Oh yeah, so that's so Epic's just acquiring all the companies. We need the FTC to look into this.
Yeah, that's for certain. Yeah, right. Oh god.
But yeah, no, I mean, they didn't show much. I guess. I mean, it was a good trailer, but you can't really feel what the gameplay is going to be, of course. But knowing the past with Kojima trailers, I'm sure this is very much in engine.
Oh, completely
representative of the visuals. And this would be our first look at a true current gen only Decima game, right?
Yeah.
Presumably.
Like character models just as great as last time. I thought like really, really good. The one thing that I noticed, I was going to make a joke about this as through all the trailers, is I could always tell which ones were real time or not, because there was just like a lot of flickering and aliasing. And this, like the way they do their depth of field here around the hair was always like super flickery in this trailer. I'm curious if they can get that up and better for release. But I didn't notice any ray tracing from this trailer. But everything still looked really good. Very curious about the story, because everything I know about Death Stranding, it's hard to place this chronologically, if you can even use the term chronology with Death Stranding. But I did like the ending with the character wearing that like Iron Man getup and playing an electric guitar and singing. I have no idea what's going on in this game. I don't know what's going on there. I love it. I love it.
I mean, the game is obviously possible to have a sequel. I finished it, and seeing what happened at the end of it, I can see how they would continue it, but it would be like a new story based on, that world, I guess.
For sure.
So the main thing I would want to see this time is more exploration of the areas beneath the terrain, right? So like you spend all that time delivering, but you don't often go down into the colonies. And I would like to see more of that.
That'd be cool.
Stuff. And, maybe we'll see it. Maybe we won't. I don't know. I still can't believe how prescient that game was in terms of predicting the 2020 pandemic situation. We were all joking about, there's this guy delivering packages all by himself and staying away from everybody and doing it remotely. And it's like, he did it again, Kojima. But speaking of superhero costumes, Suicide Squad was shown again, and I think I wanted to take the point again to highlight that this is the actual Rocksteady game. It's not Gotham Knights. I know some people were confused by that. Gotham Knights didn't exactly impress. This, though, based on Rocksteady's history, at least I have a lot of high hopes for it. And I think visually it looked great in this trailer. Just the animation work on the characters, and they were very expressive. And they had the Kevin Conroy sort of tribute at the end of the trailer, which was nice. So I don't know. What do you guys make of this? I mean, they didn't show gameplay, but it's clearly in-engine stuff.
Well, the conceit seems to be that the Justice League have gone bad and need to be taken down.
Which is fun.
Seems to be some particularly egregious abuse of the Flash.
Cut off his finger, right? That's great.
I really liked the character design. It was really, really impressive, I thought.
Yeah.
We just don't really know because, although I suspect what we saw was in-game, it wasn't actually in-game. It was,
right.
It was a cutscene, right?
It's a cutscene. The expressions, though, on the faces, man, they're
very good.
There's something about the way they model their characters where they look kind of realistic, but also with sort of a cartoony angle that's really somehow it really works well, I think.
Yeah.
They're very expressive. The lighting and model quality is exceptional here. And I assume this is just going to be an Unreal Engine 4 game. But it's interesting because Arkham Knight still holds up, and that was their take on UE3. That was that's the only game I think that ever came close to that one tech demo that Epic shared.
Samaritan,
yeah, the Samaritan demo. It felt like they looked at that demo and were like, "We're going to do that with Arkham Knight," and then they did do that. And then we haven't seen anything on Unreal Engine 4 from these guys yet, and they skipped that entire generation with that engine. So.
I know, right? Jeez. I mean, the one thing that is curious, the last 2 times we've seen this game, that the trailers have also been 60 FPS. So I'm presuming that their current gen versions of the game perhaps have a 60 FPS mode, given that. So I'd look forward to that, see if they also, once again, if maybe they'll do the 30-60 split with the RT in one mode.
It does not mention last gen consoles either, so
that's encouraging.
Current gen only again, which is actually something that seems pretty consistent through a lot of this show, is that almost everything announced seems to be current gen only.
Yes.
Which is positive.
I think 2023 is looking so rich for content that this actually paid off for the Game Awards because they could actually show real-time stuff.
Right, finally.
There was a marked decrease in pre-rendered CG nonsense, which I was really happy about. I actually thought I was seeing some games, which generally helps.
It's about the games, baby.
Yeah. Chad Warden, all about games.
That's right.
But yeah, talking about games, there was also a demo drop for Spoken.
Sporefolk.
Sporefolk. I love that. Let's just call it for that.
We can make up our own words here.
Yeah, exactly. I do it all the time in my videos, people. Come on.
Yeah, and so I checked out that demo this morning. I think John did as well.
Yeah,
I think it's kind of something they had to do because nothing that they've shown so far has given any kind of impression other than, oh, this looks quite interesting. I'll wait to see how it actually sort of shakes out. There were performance concerns throughout all of the previous demonstrations. The demo is fairly solid. It can drop both 30 and 60 FPS modes can drop in combat. I noted.
It feels mushy, I thought. Like the controls were relatively unresponsive.
Yeah.
It controls okay, but it just has that heavy feeling. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So yeah, it was good to actually get code in people's hands, which I think is obviously far more impactful than any kind of trailer can ever be, really.
Big time.
But I still think the jury's out on the game itself. And I think we were talking about this before we filmed, that there's this bizarre culture clash between Japanese developers and US dialogue.
Yeah. When she first walked into that shack at the beginning, and like the book or the armband thing
that talks,
was like narrating, and then she's just like, I want to find a place to put my head down. And
you can bleep that out, Solomon.
Please bleep that out, Oliver.
I was just like, wait, what? It's just it's an unexpected thing that just it really seems to clash with the game, I guess. Like, I know they're trying to do this, like, somebody from another world lost in a very different world thing, but I don't know.
And
the dialogue.
Well, my takeaway was that the world itself was really sort of epic in scope and looked fantastic.
It looks good.
The combat system, interesting. I literally only just had time to play the demo for about 10 minutes before we kicked off this recording session. But, it's promising. I'm really interested to see what we're actually going to get when it actually ships. Oliver's going to be doing a video on the actual demo because I think there's still plenty of interesting discussion points in here.
But also, it has a 120 hertz mode, which is not 120 frames per second. Instead, it's, as the menu suggests, it's just there to improve input response.
But
that's
exist.
The only mode I tried, and it didn't feel that responsive. So now I'm like,
Well, I mean, it's technically, even if it was still like 30 and or 60 in a 120 hertz container, it would have better input response due to triple buffering, perhaps. But also, it's a bit like, whatever.
I will say though, I felt like the lighting in the world was a step down from what we saw in Final Fantasy 15. All those years ago. Like that game was well known for its very impressive use of global illumination at a time when it was still relatively uncommon in those big worlds. It still holds up very well in that regard. And here, this felt like a step down thus far.
Yeah.
We'll have to see more to find out. I can't imagine them not taking advantage of those visual features, considering, we're on more powerful hardware and that engine was already very capable. So
super capable. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, the two modes were, they are targeting 30 and 60, and it is ray tracing and performance, which kind of tallies with your previous comments there. Mm-hmm. I mean, I really do want to see those 30 FPS ray tracing modes, even though I suspect Alex is just eyeing the PC versions and running them at 60 and beyond.
Yeah, that's the thing, right?
And it kind of varies per game. Like, I would usually prefer 60 in many cases, but then when a game like, say, the Callisto Protocol, with the way its atmosphere is designed and the style of gameplay, I think it's okay enough at 30 FPS, and I was willing to give up frame rate for that sweet ray tracing in that case.
Sweet ray tracing. I think in this case, based upon their presentations, the ray tracing is shadows. RT shadows, which, I mean, we'll have to see what Oliver shows, but I don't know if it's like super big deal in this world, like that the shadows are done by RT, unless it really helps out the long distance views. That's what I was thinking.
Long distance shadowing can definitely benefit from that.
That's a good part of RT, if it's not too expensive. Yeah.
Let's see, what else was there? Don't want to talk too much about it because time, but
yes,
go check out the Replaced trailer. That's coming out next year. Still love it. It's like a pseudo 3D pixel art game that reminds me of Flashback. So that's exciting. Tekken 8 was shown again, which this is another Unreal Engine 5 title. And as we know, it is targeting 60 FPS. So it looks like Tekken. I gather they're not using any of the new Unreal Engine features. It doesn't seem like it. But it's so hard to tell from these quick cuts, right? Like maybe they are, but maybe not. Like I don't know yet from this. It does look good though, I would say. It's very detailed, moves smoothly. It'll run at 60 FPS. So that's all good stuff.
I guess another big thing was the announcement of the Burning Shores DLC for Horizon Forbidden West, which again is going to be PlayStation 5 exclusive, which I think is fantastic news. They were talking about the difficult decision to leave PlayStation 4 behind with this DLC. Is it really that difficult?
Well, maybe they got
to say that for their fans.
I guess if you bought Horizon Forbidden West on PS4, you would have perhaps had the expectation that the DLC would have been on the PS4 as well.
Yeah, it's pretty true. Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm really excited to seeing what they can do when they don't have to accommodate such a resource-constrained platform. And I think something which you talked about earlier, John, is that procedural generation has been used to kind of leverage the power of the current gen systems while still maintaining compatibility with the last gen. And I'm kind of interested to see whether they do more than just use proceduralism to add that extra visual hit to to the proceedings. So yeah, again, not really that much shown in the trailer. It's kind of more Horizon, brilliant this time in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I mean that was for their last DLC for the original game, the Frozen Wilds. I guess that was also a new locale. They introduced the snow deformation.
Yeah, maybe they'll do something similar here. New tech for this.
Exactly,
area.
New environment, some new tech. Could be very beautiful. I'll be keeping an eye on that. Another Unreal game. We're finally. You hear all these developers switching to Unreal, and we're finally seeing those games come out to play. They showed this one again. It's the Lords of the Fallen, which has been in sort of development heck, if you will, for quite some time, going through many different developers. They finally have something to show. I actually thought it looked pretty darn good, but go back and look at Lords of the Fallen from 2014 running on a PC at 60 FPS. Like some of those, especially that early area with that introduction cutscene, that was pretty darn amazing for the time, I think. And it still holds up really shockingly well. Yeah. But of course, the Lords of the Fallen isn't actually from that same developer, Deck 13. They're doing that other game instead, which also looks pretty good, but wasn't shown here.
Yeah.
Speaking of looking good, though, so we got to keep moving. Cyberpunk Phantom Liberty.
This is swan song for Red Engine, right? So this is, I'm assuming at this point in time, Ray Tracing Overdrive is going to launch with this launching because it's not out yet. But the trailer was showing off PC footage, and I thought it looked just so good. Like as always, even the new character close-ups, because they have Idris Elba. I don't actually know how he says his name, because this people don't know sometimes, so I just want to say that. But they showed the shots of the citizens outside on that boulevard area, and it just straight up looks like just as good or even better than a lot of the UE5 stuff we see. And it's I'm really gonna miss Red Engine. It looked so good in Cyberpunk. So good.
And this one is another one that's not going to be, thankfully ported back to the last gen systems.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully that gives them some freedom with the environments. Because if you recall, Blood and Wine for Witcher 3 was a significant visual step up in many ways, I'd say, from stock of Witcher 3. So I'm kind of hoping for something similar here. Moving on, another surprising announcement, I guess, and one that I'm very happy to see, even if it's hard to tell it seems very much like a cinematic trailer. Armored Core 6 was announced. And so Armored Core is a very long-running series that has had a huge gap between releases. It basically ended in 2013, and we've seen nothing since. From Software has been busy with Souls games and other similar titles such as Bloodborne and Sekiro. And in fact, I believe one of the leads on Sekiro is helming this title. And I'm very curious to see what Armored Core becomes in a post-Souls From Software. Right? Armored Core was very popular, but it was pretty hardcore, I would say. I like these games, but you spend a lot of time sort of upgrading and tweaking and building your mechs to go out on missions, but you can end up in some pretty tricky situations in regards to your funds and literally unable to repair your mech because you can't afford it anymore. And
oh gosh,
there's a lot of it's a pretty hardcore series in many ways, and I wonder if they're going to integrate some aspects of their more recent successes in there. Exploration. Hard to say. The thing that's a little concerning, though, is that this one, it is cross-gen.
Oh, no.
And
so late and cross-gen?
I can't imagine what it's going to look like there, given that their technical chops aren't exactly there. Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, we know.
We'll see, though. Yeah. I like the visual style of the trailer. I'm just sure it doesn't represent what the game will look like in action.
And not at all. I mean, Dark Souls 2 was also announced with a trailer that looked better than every UE5 title, and then Dark Souls 2 comes out,
well, Dark Souls 2 also had that weird pre-release state, right? Where
it had
more advanced shadow casting. I played that version on a PS3 with dynamic shadows at Gamescom that year, and it was looked awesome. And then when the final game shipped, well, it didn't look awesome
It did not look awesome in comparison.
Just had a sudden sort of trauma flashback to Elden Ring on Xbox One.
Yeah, how that ran.
Right.
And looked.
It runs worse than the Steam Deck, which is pretty impressive.
Poor old Xbox One. It's trying its best. It's just hanging in there. One game that's not coming to Xbox One, though, is Final Fantasy 16, which it got a release of June 22nd, not 23rd, 22nd, which, yeah, that's not that far away. And I'm very excited for this. It feels, from what I've kind of gleaned, this game has been basically complete for a while, and they're essentially in the polishing phase. And this is the most amount of time they've had seemingly to polish up one of these games before release. So it could result in something that's really, really just like buttoned up perfectly. I know the visuals have come a long way since the original reveal. It now looks phenomenal. I'm very curious to see how it plays and what it offers, and if it can help bring Final Fantasy back to the forefront in terms of releases. We'll see that.
And you were saying that this is this is Crystal Tools or something, didn't you say? It's like some sort of weird.
I can't remember.
Right?
I feel like it's derived from something relating to Final Fantasy 14, which in turn was derived from Crystal Tools.
Wow!
But the second Final Fantasy 14, I think, versus the original release that failed, was based on. Was that the Luminous stuff?
It might have been really old.
No, that wouldn't.
No, it's too old.
Maybe that was Crystal Tools.
Either way,
just ignore me. I'm confused. Square's engine history is complicated, we'll say.
Yeah.
Either way, this looks great. So
absolutely.
What else did they show? We finally saw Ken Levine's next game called Judas. It looks very Bioshock, kind of,
like
not
extremely Bioshock.
Not System Shock, right?
Yeah.
They've not really gone back to the System Shock 2 aesthetic. But that's where the System Shock remake comes in next year. Different team, but that looks pretty dope.
That looks dope.
Just going to put it out there, but I'd like to see I Am Judas as the follow-up sequel to I Am Jesus Christ.
That's the follow-up game. Once they complete I Am Jesus Christ,
it's the DLC.
The DLC is I Am Judas,
and just roaming around hiding from hordes of Christians or something.
It could be a stealth game.
Yeah, it's a stealth game.
You got to sneak out.
It's kind of resource management. You've got 20 pieces of silver.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's all you got. Oh, that's good, Rich. That is literally.
This is 2 weeks of blasphemy from me.
But
Rich.
in terms of this was also an engine, whatever the engine is. I imagine it's Unreal, just based upon every single thing. And I think it looked pretty. It looked okay, but in terms of just the art style, it seemed like very UE4 kind of like technology based.
Yeah,
nothing too interesting from a tech level.
I gather
definitely a sort of stylistic aesthetic though, right?
Yeah, for sure.
It stood out.
Yeah, in comparison to the rest of the stuff that we saw, and some of the stuff that we saw, yeah, for sure, it stood out.
Anything else? I Post-Trauma I thought looked cool. Old school camera, fixed camera angles, very Silent Hill-ish in a way. And it made me pine for more games with fixed camera angles. I actually miss this. I really like directed cameras that do fancy tricks with the camera work. I think that can be very effective in certain genres. And there's just been this push towards free camera for everything, which, I
get it.
It's good for gameplay. I get it. But I think you can do some cool stuff with fixed cameras.
Yeah, and I'm also very curious, just like graphically, what's going on there. Was there an engine announcement? I do not know, but I thought it looked pretty good, all things considered.
Yeah,
so
kind of an indie title there.
I was just going to say, obviously there's a lot of stuff discussed here and a lot of really interesting stuff. And there's a huge amount of content coming in 2023, a huge amount of great games, and Microsoft just didn't turn up.
No, nothing.
Which is kind of strange because they've got quite a storied history with the Game Awards.
Yeah,
they did the Series X form factor announcement at Game Awards. Absolutely nothing. And there seemed to be some tweets from Microsoft, Aaron Greenberg, etc., saying, "Hey, don't worry, we've got stuff. We're showing it soon." But what kind of venues are there? I suppose you can do your own shows these days. You don't really need to compete against other content. But at the same time, it is a big event, and there was zero representation from Xbox in a year where there's been zero representation from Xbox, really. I had Pentiment and Deathloop.
The thing about that is, like, in the past, if you remember, they would often advertise each new year as the best year in Xbox history. This one, 2022, I would argue, was the worst year in Xbox history in terms of, like, original titles
coming out.
Even looking back, there is no other year I can think of that had so little from a major first party. And I think part of this is the COVID effect.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
Clearly, they wanted Starfield this year, right? Like, that was the original, and that would have been huge. That's coming next year. I think they'll have some good stuff next year, for sure. But it is kind of odd how they just kind of disappeared, and it's just Game Pass basically all year. But, I mean, Pentiment is cool, though.
Yeah, Pentiment's good.
Thing.
It's a good game.
Not to discount that, but I am a little surprised that they didn't. I kind of expected them to show a little more Starfield. Like, the game is a known thing now. It's likely to release before any big next events, right?
It's a good point, actually, yeah.
And Forza, Forza Motorsport.
Sure,
exactly. There's great things to show there.
Oh, for sure.
So, yeah, kind of curious. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we wrap it up with the Geoffs?
You said that I wanted to say something, John.
You mentioned to me Banisher's Ghosts of New Eden.
Oh, yes.
From Don't Nod.
From Don't Nod.
Which I actually mistakenly skipped the trailer the first time because the name just didn't click. Like, I didn't take anything from it, but then I realized, I know this developer. They've done good stuff. So
they've done good stuff. And actually, the one thing I want to point out with the trailer is the initial part of the trailer is cinematic angles, etc. But in terms of like aliasing and like if you look at the fireplace, like the logs next to the fireplace, they're actually pretty low poly. So I actually think that intro part may have been an engine tech, that's pretty impressive looking.
Yeah, it looks really good.
But at the very end of the trailer, there's a little sizzle there of them showing the gameplay camera behind the character as they, with their ghost companion, confront some other sort of ghosts. And that looked really, really good. And the reason why I want to point this out is because I think their games we haven't really covered. I don't really recall if we ever covered Life is Strange. Did we ever?
No.
That's weird because I've played them all.
Yeah,
I like them, but I've not actually covered them.
They make good games with like great usage of Unreal Engine at that point in time, I believe. So I would really love to see them expanding that into like more traditional action RPGs, like to see what the team can do here. Because they've had good narrative chops, and what if they bring that to an action game? That'd be great. So I look forward to it.
Did you ever try Vampire from them?
No. Or is that the one spelled with a Y?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Vampire.
I haven't tried it, but I heard it's pretty okay, actually.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah.
And hey, they were one of the first developers ever to do physically based materials in a game, right?
With Remember Me.
With Remember Me.
Yeah.
That shipped on the Triple.
Triple's best game. Yeah.
But to me at least, that seems like that's pretty much the main stuff from the Geoffs. It was a pretty interesting show. I did not catch it live because it started at midnight, and it was better just to wake up and check all this stuff out in the morning. But yeah, there's some good stuff there.
We missed Chris Judge's amazing speech.
Oh yeah,
that was insane.
I was particularly sort of taken by the way they tried to make him stop by playing music, and it just made his speech even more epic.
It did. That was incredible. Yeah, he's such a boss. Like that outfit, just the way he. I love it. He'll always be Teal'c to me, but he does a good Kratos as well.
Have we ever talked about Stargate on DF? Like ever? We should
love
probably
Stargate.
talk about Stargate one time. I like Stargate. It's fun.
It's a fun series. I love that. Get some Richard Dean Anderson in there.
Why not? Yeah.
Good stuff. There was actually awards at this show, by the way.
Yeah, Elden Ring won Game of the Year.
It did?
Not surprisingly.
Unsurprisingly, it also won Best Game Direction. It won Best Art Direction. It probably won more things. It did not win Innovation and Accessibility.
That is not surprising at all.
Okay, no, here's the thing about the awards that drives me nuts, and it's a shame we're in this position, but they have an award category that says Best Sports/Racing Game, and it's F1 22, FIFA, NBA 2K23, Ollie Ollie World, which it's not a racing game, and then Gran Turismo 7, which won. But I'm so bummed out that we're in this position where the racing genre has become so... It has contracted to the point where it's now combined with regular sports. That sucks. And they also missed... they couldn't have gotten Need for Speed Unbound in there because obviously they came out too late. But there was also that Grid game earlier in the year that was really
you liked
good.
A lot.
Grid Legends.
Yeah.
That was actually solid. So I don't know. That category makes me sad because it's just, racing games are obviously among my favorite.
Maybe we need to do a kind of unsung heroes end of year video. Grid Legends will certainly be in there.
That's a good idea. Man, Grid Legends, 120 frames per second, beautiful, super smooth gameplay. Man. That's pretty much it.
For the Geoffs.
Okay. Well, let's move on to our next news topic, and I've got to we've been going about this for so long. I've got to refer back to the docket to see what it is we're actually talking about. Yeah, this was just an interesting story I picked up on, which is the Gamers Nexus and Linus Tech Tips. Actually, I haven't watched their content yet, but it seems to be the case that with Stadia dying, dev kits are now available to buy. It looks as though they're cropping up in Japan, of all places. And Gamers Nexus spent $1,000 on buying one and basically did a teardown video. And I'm just glad I didn't buy one. I mean, it's just basically exactly what the spec suggests, right? Which is, a server class Xeon CPU and essentially a pro version of the Vega 56 GPU. It is literally just a Radeon Pro
professional.
Pretty much, yeah. And Steve, Gamers Nexus, was kind of impressed and unimpressed with the construction of the kit itself, which was essentially just a Lenovo pre-built that's been repurposed by Google. But, for me, the big mystery still remains. This thing had a 10 teraflop GPU or thereabouts in it. And the games produced were worse than Xbox One X at 6 teraflop on an older architecture. And I've still got no concrete evidence as to why these games underperformed, why they undershot so much. The dev kit doesn't really give us any answers. It's exactly as the spec that Google supplied was.
Is it possible that they were dividing resources?
Well, this has been my theory from day one, right? Which is that, let's say your actual shipping games are delivering results worse than a 6 teraflop GPU. Maybe you've basically got 2 5 teraflop GPUs, being virtualized from one piece of hardware. That's been my sort of working theory for a while. But, there's all manner of weirdness. I mean, I think... Tomb Raider, Rise of the Tomb Raider got close to Xbox One X, but all of the other games, I mean, Red Dead was 1440p 30, it's 4K 30 on Xbox One X. The list goes on, right? So, it's kind of curious to see, Google's hardware getting out there, being picked up.
It had that decent version of Cyberpunk at launch, though.
It's still, that's a pretty good example of a title that did actually, I think, punch above its weight compared to the last gen consoles. But I've got a feeling there that it's down to the CPU.
Yeah, 100%.
As opposed to the GPU.
It's probably right.
So, any Stadia developers out there, please, get in touch behind the scenes. Let us know why the GPU underperforms compared to its spec. I'd love to know. We might even do like a Stadia eulogy video at some point while the system is still working. We'll play some Assassin's Creed Unity.
Actually, we should do a live stream for that.
Before,
Wait. That might be a bad idea.
That would involve using the internet connection for streaming and for streaming.
Wait. Okay.
Some exhibit style
I have
streaming.
now got gigabit though, so maybe it would work. It might be worth a go.
Could be.
Exactly.
Should we move on to the next news topic?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I think we should. Basically this one is the sad news that Microsoft's first-party titles are moving up to $70 if you wish to purchase them. They're one of the last holdouts to actually increase prices. But it's happened, and I'm wondering whether this is going to be accompanied by hardware price hikes in the short to medium term future. John, how much is this actually relevant in a world where Game Pass is basically, I mean, if you're into Microsoft first party games, a lot of people just aren't going to buy them in the first place,
right?
With Game Pass there.
Yeah, this is a tricky thing. And I also
sales
wonder,
have collapsed, haven't they? I mean, we can track sales data, and Microsoft first party titles are vanishing these small game sales now because of the prevalence of Game Pass.
Yep. I feel like they've collapsed by like 80% versus where they were prior to Game Pass, and for good reason. I mean, the Xbox faithful are very into Game Pass, so it kind of doesn't, for most of them, it probably doesn't make sense to buy it. And also, Microsoft thus far has had this bad habit of shipping incomplete discs, like that are basically coasters, like Halo and Forza Horizon 5. I would love to have those games on a disc in my collection right now, but that the disc is just basically a download key, which is similar to what Activision did with Call of Duty again, which is a huge bummer. I hate that kind of stuff. But I think I wouldn't be surprised actually if Game Pass though increases in price as well at some point.
Right.
I feel like that's gonna have to happen sooner or later.
When they get Call of Duty on it, day one.
Yeah, maybe so.
Right.
The thing here though is I think this was long overdue to increase the price of games like this, and we don't like to hear it. And I mean, who does? You don't want to pay more for your games, but the $60 price was basically established with the Xbox 360 era, if I recall, and it's been that since then, right? So we're coming up on quite a few years of this, but development costs have spiraled out of control. I would argue that we're at a very precarious point where gamer expectations are extremely high for visual fidelity. Creating that fidelity is difficult and expensive and requires a lot of people, from what I can tell. And it's because of this, it's like it just costs more to make. So if the game doesn't succeed in a big way, you're probably not going to make up your investment, right? It's created this situation where, and I think this is why we see so many sequels to the games that are a hit, because you find something that actually makes money, you're not going to risk it by doing a new IP, I think, and you end up with this situation where every game needs to hit if you want to make back your cash. I think Microsoft, more than others, could have probably accepted that hit, but they're also in it to make money. So I think this was just something that needed to happen given both the state of the world now and just the increased costs it takes to make these games. So I don't blame them at all.
I mean, in the short term, it makes Game Pass more attractive still.
Oh, for sure.
But the question is the extent to which they can continue to hold prices where they are at the moment.
I will say this, though. The price situation is a little bit weird because both Sony and Microsoft, their games tend to drop in price pretty quick, right? So if you're looking at retail, you can find retail copies of these games on the cheap pretty easily, which, by the way, is a problem if you're on Series S, because you're not going to be able to take advantage of these sales. So you really are in that Game Pass ecosystem. But if you want to get a disc version of these games, they tend to drop pretty quickly. And so a lot of people just wait. They see the $70 price or the €80 price, and you're like, oh, I'll just wait, get it on sale. Whereas Nintendo, who hasn't actually increased their prices yet, they have a different strategy where they basically don't do price drops, or they do them so rarely and so late that I think people are more willing to just spend up front for those Nintendo games if they want them, because they know that you're not going to find it for sale in a month. It just doesn't happen, right? So they're in a very enviable position in that regard. And as a result, they can probably hold on a bit longer. But that's just that's what they've made their audience accustomed to, right? And I think a lot of the responsibility lies in how customers, or how you've approached your releases over the years. We've seen there was a race to the bottom for pricing and sales and, subscriptions. And I think now it's a lot harder to convince somebody to shell out for a game. And games are less of an event these days, by and large, save for a few really big titles, right?
Yeah.
So, I remember the hype cycles of these games coming in, and people would go line up at the stores There was a lot of excitement around this stuff. Every trailer was an event, and then it comes out. Everybody is there on day one. I feel like that's changed and it's probably not coming back. So that's just me rambling about all this stuff. There's so many different avenues to discuss with this pricing stuff, but my point, I guess, in the end is just, I'm not surprised this had to happen for Microsoft as well.
So one thing I'm looking at this year is that it's they're raising their pricing, but I don't know if there's differentiation there for PC versus console. And I'm looking at what Sony does, and they launched The Last of Us Part 1 on PS5 for $69.99 in the currency that is, but it was just listed on Steam yesterday for $59.99, The Last of Us Part 1. So it's cheaper on PC. So I'm curious if they're going to keep that up, this trend of always having the console players pay more for the same game that people are paying for on PC.
I think, Alex, the difference here is with Sony's products, the PC version is a separate SKU, right? You don't get the PlayStation version with PC, but Microsoft, I guess there's Steam, but Microsoft likes to do that cross-buy thing, right? So you buy it on PC, you buy it on Xbox, doesn't matter. It's all the same game on every platform.
That is nice.
So I suspect the $70 price will apply on the PC as well for that reason.
We'll see. Yeah, we'll see.
I think in the end, they probably announced this now because they're getting ready to announce the Starfield release date at some point soon.
Right.
And they couldn't very well start taking pre-orders on Starfield if they were planning to charge $70, without first announcing that, basically get the bad news out of the way. Like, we're going up to 70. Now it's time to announce when Starfield's coming out, and for you can pre-order it.
Good point.
Okay, I think we'll wrap up the news for there, and we'll move on to supporter Q&A. This is, of course, the part of the show where every week we solicit questions from our supporters on the DF supporter program. We choose the best, or rather, often the ones we can actually answer. And we're going to kick off with a bit of concern from Eric Benoit. Is Alex doing better this week? Alex's demeanour last week is a result of his sincere desire to do a great job, as he always does, reviewing PC games for DF. Has DF ever considered a numbered rating criteria when reviewing games? Do you think that would help send a message that certain issues in games like shader stutter are unacceptable, or would it destroy the nuance of a comprehensive review? Well, I'm glad to hear that you are feeling better.
I am feeling better. And I also saw your DM, Eric. I just haven't responded yet. Sorry about that.
And I'm not too particularly interested in the concept of numbered ratings. Don't know what you guys think.
It's too arbitrary.
Too arbitrary, yeah. And then people look at the number, and then instead of focusing on the review, which already happens technically in DF reviews, where someone posts the code.
The resolutions.
Yeah, when we do the resolutions, there's like a time code. Skip ahead to Alex's optimized settings for this, and I'm like, you bastard. But there's definitely a lot more to review than a number, and that's why I wouldn't do it. John?
Well, John, I'll tell you what. I was watching your Fortnite content. You were saying that the average resolution of Series X is 59% 4K versus 55% on PlayStation 5. I can't tell the difference, but surely this is quantifiable evidence that the Xbox Series X is 4% better.
Exactly. That's key. Yeah, that stuff. That's funny. Power narrative.
Axis resolution.
Hashtag power narrative, yeah. I don't know. I don't really see the point for badges, and I think maybe sort of end of the year, game of the year stuff is quite interesting. But even then, we do it on a person by person basis.
Yeah.
I think possibly the only badge I would consider would be an avoid badge.
Yeah, that's maybe the only one. Yeah.
Anything to add to that one, John?
I would be up for both an avoid badge and just like a thumbs up kind of badge, not a number, but like I wouldn't mind a shorthand to be like, hey, this is actually okay technically. Right.
Maybe, well, in the Patreon trailer I did this week, we had those fake YouTube thumbs.
Yes, which were a hit.
Yeah, exactly.
So maybe we could sum up the whole game with a fake YouTube thumb, which would be, touching your head in pain, thumbs up, laughing, red arrows
I was gonna say, like,
with emojis.
Exactly.
Projectile vomiting. We could do a whole bunch of really great ones.
So yeah, the Callisto Protocol PC gets a projectile vomiting award from Digital Foundry.
Yeah.
I think that response also sums up this question from Frosty Grey Bob. As Eurogamer gives games a recommended or essential badge for well-reviewed games, would you consider implementing a Digital Foundry DF seal of quality to games that meet a certain level of technical accomplishment? It's such an arbitrary thing, though, you know. And what I think what's happening on Eurogamer actually is that there's actually a really sort of large amount of games that don't get badges at all, and people are asking why they don't get badges when they can actually be really, really good games.
The badge thing is weird. I still have this, like, I'm still haunted by it. I occasionally do reviews. I reviewed Ace Combat 7 when it came out for Eurogamer, and I was debating on whether to give it a recommended or essential badge. And it was basically told, like, well, only use essential if it would be something you consider like Game of the Year quality. And this was in January. So I was like, well, I better just go with recommended. And then Ace Combat 7 was my Game of the Year that year. So I was like, dang it, I should have given it essential.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
So, regret.
Okay, next question. This one from Mike Renner. Given the choice between playing the latest games on a 65-inch top-of-the-line OLED with all the latest HDMI 2.1 features, or a 130-inch HDR projector, HDR quote unquote, with HDMI 2.0 and a peak brightness of 100 nits.
1,000, hopefully they mean? Do they mean 1,000 nits, I hope?
Probably they got to mean 1,000 nits because 100. For a projector, though, I don't know.
Oh yeah, who knows? Okay.
Which experience would you prefer? Does size trump all?
Oh, that's a question.
I actually would argue the opposite to a degree. I think finding the right screen size is really important based on your environment, and a small screen can still be rather immersive. You know, being into the world of CRTs, they're not huge. But when you're actually parked in front of a good CRT, you still feel a level of immersion. I find the problem with really large screens, once you go over a certain size, I mean, if you're far enough distance, it's fine. But, you know, it just starts to reveal all the flaws in the games, right? Like, you want to play a Switch game on a 130-inch HDR projector? No, it's going to look terrible. But then again, 130 for a projector, that reminds me of at E3 that one year I saw somebody wheeled out one of those 150-inch Panasonic plasmas. I think it was 150-inch.
Massive.
But seeing an actual flat panel screen at that size, it was supported by like 2 columns, and it heated up the room so much. It was insane. Like, you stand next to it, it feels like you're next to like a generator. It's crazy. Just the amount of heat that comes off of it. But size definitely doesn't trump all for me. But I don't know about you guys.
It's very much dependent on how far you are away from the screen, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Alex, you and I have both got 48-inch OLEDs, which we use as PC monitors.
Yeah, they're close.
And you can't really... I mean, you did go higher. You had a 55-inch screen.
Yeah, and that was too much. One thing I noticed, though, is that screen distance, we don't talk about it too often, but screen distance also, in my humble opinion, requires a higher refresh rate, because the gap between frames, when it's physically larger in front of you, like each gap is larger physically, it becomes more obvious. And I always thought 60 hertz when I was really close to the screen did not feel as comfortable as 120 hertz close to the screen, and vice versa. It's also why 60 FPS content on your phone can sometimes look better in terms of fluidity, because you don't see the gappiness as much.
It's also why I think console games at 30 FPS tend to be a bit more acceptable than playing a PC game
when you're right up close,
or if you're playing a console game on a monitor. When you sit too close to a screen, 30 FPS becomes very difficult to stomach.
Yeah. So I don't care about big projections and stuff like that. So I would probably go for the one that has the highest refresh rate. So that would be the HDMI 2.1 one here. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. This one from Captain Rainbow. With Portal RTX requiring DLSS to get good frame rates at 4K, even on a 4090, the question remains, quality, balanced, or performance? It should be a pretty simple question, though, Alex, although I think we should possibly maybe outline why 4K path tracing is actually quite a big ask of any GPU, including the 4090. I've seen quite a lot of benchmarks this week for Portal RTX.
I have too, yeah.
And they're all the ones I saw, all 4K. And, the Radeon cards are like 1 frame per second. And obviously it scales up as you have a more powerful GPU. But you don't need a 4090 to play Portal RTX.
No, of course not.
But the whole question of DLSS quality levels, it's well, in my experience, it's title by title dependent. But basically, the higher the resolution that your output is, basically the lower the DLSS quality level needs to be. And conversely, the lower your output resolution, the higher the internal resolution needs to be. So your quality settings should be going up. I mean, this is kind of like the accepted norm now, right? Performance mode for 4K, balance for 1440p, and quality for 1080p.
That's the way I see it, especially and if you are not comfortable with performance because you have very sensitive visual acuity and you think I'm seeing way too many jaggies or I'm seeing too much something, then put it up to balanced and then quality to see if it helps you at all. That's the way I would say it. Don't just immediately go to quality mode because you read online on Reddit that only quality mode DLSS is good. It is pretty per game basis. And just to really quickly touch on why Portal RTX is really expensive. One thing you have to think about with Portal RTX, I haven't covered it yet. I am really looking forward to cover it. There's a lot of stuff going on. We'll see when everything pans out. But in that game, you can literally tweak the amount of bounces of GI with the developer menu. And so if you have 4 bounces of GI, that means just for diffuse lighting, you're getting 4 ray traces and then 1 for the primary view. This is an insane amount of ray tracing. It's so intense, it's so much, and it's all happening in 1 frame too. It's not just staggered over frames. So it's Portal RTX can be really expensive, but you can also probably make it quite a bit cheaper with the settings of that developer menu. So,
I mean, every path trace title so far, you've kind of had to use had to use imagery construction, right? Simply just due to the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
So it's not, I've seen quite a lot of comments about how Portal RTX is basically designed to funnel you to RTX 4000 because it's the only GPUs that can run it.
That's not
the case.
No.
It's basically all down to the settings configurations, and it's not as if the arrival of 4090 and 4080 has suddenly made the Ampere cards not great.
Still great.
It's just a different workload, and you can scale your GPU and your settings accordingly, and everything kind of should be fine. I think another sort of video where maybe we should consider it at some point is just how well the RTX 2060 has held up.
Oh, that'd be great. That's a fun one.
Yeah, because this is, from what I can see, the last time I looked, it was the number 2 GPU now on the Steam hardware survey, which is quite an interesting achievement because it's a GPU that nobody seems to talk about anymore. which is kind of strange.
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of interesting. I show it occasionally in my videos, but I've pretty much always used the 2060S just because I have the RX 5700 to compare it against. I actually probably would like to show the 2060 more just because I know it's more popular. But yeah, it's a good question. Why do people not talk about that GPU?
Final question, this one from Eric Hurst. Rich, you once said that maybe someday there wouldn't be Xbox and PlayStation consoles and that instead there would be Xbox OS and PlayStation OS and folks could install those on the hardware they're choosing. Do you still believe that may one day happen, especially now that we have something like SteamOS 3, which according to Valve, they will eventually release as a package to be installed on any machine? My answer to that is basically in the wake of the bickering, the petty bickering that I've seen in the Activision stuff from Sony and Microsoft, these guys are not going to cooperate anytime soon. And it is the concept is based on a very simple idea, which is that why have Microsoft and Sony eventually now basically now had 2 generations, a decade's worth of basically making very similar hardware, when they could just come together and basically have their own ecosystems on a singular platform, and it would save a huge amount of R&D dollars, and it would end platform comparisons for good.
It would just call it the AMD machine, and then you just play Xbox or PlayStation games on it, because that's what you're getting right now.
There are obstacles to that, obviously, and the ecosystems are subsidizing the cost of the hardware to a certain extent. But even so, it does still strike me as rather odd that we have two companies producing essentially identical machines. I mean, the gap now between PlayStation 5 and Series X is, well, it's 4% in Fortnite.
So it is, yeah.
It's actually extremely rare that we actually see some differences, and we're trying to sort of play down that there's not really that much difference between them, but it's quite remarkable how people seize upon, minor fluctuations in performance data to justify which console they've bought, when essentially it's the same thing, right? That's kind of like the overarching sort of thing that sort of defined that philosophy. And I 100% believe that Phil would put Game Pass on PlayStation if he could. In
a heartbeat.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think the thing that underlines this philosophy, though, and it's why the SteamOS thing doesn't really make sense, is that it still requires the concept of a fixed hardware platform to work towards, to get the most out of. I mean, we're talking. We just put up a video about Callisto Protocol, and it's not looking great on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. But the fact that it's existing at all on hardware that was designed in 2010, 2011. Is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And this is all down to the power of the fixed platform, which is something that a Valve machine or some kind of OS that would run on any piece of hardware it wouldn't work the same way. I don't know. Any thoughts from you on this one, John?
No, I mean, I think you're pretty much right on the money with that, and I don't think we'd see it, especially because it's not even a fixed platform. But boy, all that bickering though between them, it does seem like we're never going to see them working together on something like that. So
yeah, it's a bit stupid, really. But
yeah,
I don't really want to get too involved in the FTC stuff and whatnot,
no.
because it is just almost tantamount to name calling and accusations of hypocrisy one way or the other.
It's pretty nasty.
And yeah, we'll steer well clear of that one for now. But I think that's it. That's our final question of the show, and with that, the end of the show. So if you did enjoy it, please like, subscribe, share, ring the bell for those notionally instant notifications. As always, no guarantees there, and I am making that disclaimer. DF supporter program. We put out a trailer this week about what the supporter program has done for us in the last 18 months and what we want to do in future. So yeah, do check that out, because we've got big plans and we need your help. But that's all from us for now. This is a weekly show, so in theory at least, barring a nuclear disaster of some description, we will be back next week. But in the meantime, thanks for watching.